All right, everybody, welcome back to the KSR YouTube channel. And it's another day of working on SoccerMom. And if you can tell by the background and by the fish pond, see Will and his wife's fish hiding down in there. I guess it's nap time. We're over at Will's house because Will has been working on SoccerMom in his home shop. Check out Will's little home shop. Got the AC running. Woohoo! Yep, because Florida, it's freaking, like, the temperature's not crazy. I mean, it's like 92 today, which is pretty warm. But the humidity, it's been raining pretty much every afternoon. And the humidity is like 75, 80%, almost all the time it feels like. And it's a little miserable to be outside working on cars. But we're going to be inside working on cars. And we've got to get SoccerMom back up and going again. Got some new stuff for SoccerMom. And part of it is, well, Will got the engine put back together. We had to wait on a replacement connecting rod, which, you know, happens. We needed a single connecting rod, and what Texas Speed ended up doing was sending us a complete set of connecting rods. Well, they weighed a little bit different than the rods we had in it, so we had to have the rotating assembly rebalanced. Blah, 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 blah. It's all fixed. Let's go check it out. All right, inside in the air conditioning. It's our top secret engine under the blanket. No, just kidding. We've got something to modify down here, which we'll show you in a minute. But Will got the old Texas Speed 388 put back together. Put it all in. You just kind of did everything, didn't you?
Pretty much, yeah.
But fixed our issue that we had with our alternator pulley, which caused the cut fuel line problem at Indy. So this had come a little bit loose down here, and the alternator pulley had a wobble to it. And we think that's what contributed to it throwing the belt. Because don't forget, it made all of sick week, never pitched the belt even once. And I accidentally turned it 9,200 RPM. 91 or 92, I don't remember. It was way on up there. I turned the 5.3. Did I turn the 5.3 like 94 or something? 94.65 or something?
That's pretty good.
Yeah, RPM. It sounds so good. Just didn't want to shift. Anyways, didn't have any problems with it at sick week. And then at Indy, it threw the belt several times. And we figured it out and hopefully fixed it. So another thing we've been needing to fix for a while is some kind of different arrangement here. Obviously, that's what our turbo sits on. That's mounted to the chassis. This is a part of the engine, which is also mounted to the chassis with our motor plate and mid plate, but everything flexes and squirms, and if we silicone this, it leaks. If we use a gasket, it leaks. So what I've already made, and what we're gonna jump back to now is me making it, is I made a new flange, which it's right there. We won't show you it up close yet, but I made a new turbo flange that incorporates an O-ring into it. So the idea is that if the turbo moves around at all, the O-ring still keeps it sealed. So when we use silicone, which I think silicone seems to be what works the best, but it also has the most chance of failure because we put a little squirt of silicone on here, drop it on there, and then we tighten up everything else. Well, if the turbo moves as we're tightening it down before the silicone gets fully hardened, or after the silicone, as the silicone is drying, it ends up leaking. So hopefully this O-ring deal fixes that. I did the same thing on Mullet. Mullet was having leak issues at that same spot because I mounted Mullet's turbos originally the same way with the LS engine in it. And the O-ring fixed the oil leak. So we're gonna do the same thing to SoccerMom. And I guess right now, let's jump back to yesterday at the shop where we're making that turbo flange. All right, well, like I said in the video at Will's house, welcome back to yesterday, where I'm at the shop and I've got to make the flange that I showed you on SoccerMom that we needed to replace on SoccerMom. So the old flange was a 1/4 inch thick. This flange is going to be a 1/2 inch thick, because that should give us enough room to get the turbo back where it was in its same height, while still, you know, cutting the old one off and cutting the weld off a little bit. Should be pretty close, but what we want to do is make an O-ring flange that'll go on there. So got my CJ, you're making too much noise.
That's a lot of noise.
So what we're going to try and do is sink an O-ring into the flange, which actually I need a little bit bigger O-ring, don't I? Yeah, maybe not. We'll see. That seems like that's enough. All right, well, there's our almost end result. And yeah, if you noticed on the lathe, thing kind of kicked my butt. And I made a little bit of a mistake. And that's, this is 4140 chromoly. And I started cutting and then I cooled it off so that I could touch it. And all that did was harden it. And it made it very difficult to machine. So then I had to set up a carbide setup, and it took 30 minutes longer than it should have. But that's cars. They always take longer than you think they're going to. Yeah. They always take longer than you think it's going to, like the project. Anyways, so all I've got to do now is I am going to trim this down and lighten it up, but I'll probably use the mill for that, so that I can do it somewhat quickly. Just make a little bit of a mess. I'll grab it in the vise and then just mill it off. See if I got a Sharpie around here. Maybe not. Just mill those off so it's a little bit lighter weight. So we don't need all that extra material, and it's a race car. Race cars are supposed to be light. So let's get back over to Will's. I'll show you the end piece when we get back over there, and we'll get this thing welded on. All right, well, if you watched, you saw me break an end mill. I was almost done machining off one of the edges, but yeah, that's what we're left with. So we started with a piece of flat bar. So started with a piece of this and turned it into that. Complete with a recess for an O-ring. And if you saw on the machining part for the O-ring, was kind of fumbling around with that a little bit because I made a mistake in that this is 4140 chromoly. Didn't have to do that, but I wanted a nice, like a cold rolled, so that it would be nice and flat instead of a hot rolled where it's like got mill scale and stuff on it. So I ordered that, but the problem was I started machining this with a cheaper, like, I think it's a carbide tipped thing, and it's not a very hardened deal when I was cutting the O-ring groove. And I stopped and cooled it off, and all that did was harden it. And then I broke a tip and had to get a better carbide setup to do that. But, you know, I guess we should check it to see if it fits before I go do all this blabbing. Let's see if we can get that in focus here. All right, O-ring I already know fits. Nice. Got just a little bit of protrusion there, you can see. I typically shoot for 75% of the O-ring into the groove, and that's assuming like just a flat groove on the bottom, so the O-ring has some room to squish in there. All right, do my holes still line up? Well, do they line up at all? Yes, they do. Now, does it crush the O-ring and sit flat on the turbo? Ooh, I like it. Oh yeah, that's nice. Oh yeah, nice tight fit up there because it's squishing the O-ring in. That should work pretty well. And now we don't have to rush installing the turbo, because what we were doing with the old flange, we'd squirt a bead of silicone around it and drop it on there. And what would end up happening, we tried it with a gasket. Silicone seemed to work the best, but what would end up happening is it would eventually start leaking again, just because as everything heated up and contracted and the chassis moved around underneath the turbo, because the turbo is actually mounted to the chassis and the engine is mounted to the chassis, but there's still, you know, there's just movement and stuff that happens. And it was enough that it caused enough of an oil leak that we found it annoying. So this will weld to the piece that's coming off and going down to the chassis. And then we should be back in business, possibly cranking this thing up here in a few minutes. So, well, a few minutes on the video. So let's get back to the video. So let's get back to Will's house, weld this thing on, see if we can crank our Texas Speed 388 back up. Here we go. All right, well, we're back at Will's shop now. And what I've got to do is cut off the old flange so that we can weld on the new one. And that is, you can see that's a 1/2 inch thick there. The flange on the car is a 1/4 inch. And so hopefully I can get that cut off straight enough. Got the cut off wheel down here. And we're gonna be doing, like, I'm gonna cut that off, like cut the tube off just below that, and then hopefully that sinks down and we can weld it on there in one form or another. Another thing to show you guys that I almost forgot about. I know some of y'all have noticed that the lack of head padding for our seat, because we have our seat cut off down low. Well, we got our seats padded. Our old buddy Levin, who actually does some airplane interiors, put some padding on our head pads. These two go on the side, that one goes on the back. Those have some real high density, like SFI rated impact foam on them underneath the vinyl. I'm kind of excited to get those installed. It's nice to, you know, bounce your head up against something that's a little softer than a roll cage. You know, makes sense, but anyways, let's get to work. See if we can get this thing, the turbo on, and then I think by the time we do all that, we should be able to crank it on pump gas. We sent our injectors out to APHIS just to have them checked, because with alcohol injectors, or with alcohol fuel, really with any injector, you never want to let them sit and let the alcohol dry out in them. That's really bad for the injector. It can make them stick. It can leave a filmy, like, corrosion stuff inside of them. So because we wanted to be 100% sure about our injectors and this thing running at LS Fest in about a month, we decided to send them back, have them flowed, just to make sure they we got the good clean bill of health on them yesterday. So they should be back next week, and then we will be able to run the thing on alcohol again. But with the dual fuel system, we'll just crank it up on the pump gas. We're putting an old set of smaller injectors in the race side so that we can crank it up and not have a huge vacuum leak. But yeah, should be up and running hopefully by the end of this video. Stay tuned, let's see if we can make it happen. Well, like most car projects, they never quite go like you think they're gonna go. So you might have seen some recutting in the time lapse, and I ended up cutting all of it out because I guess over time things have shifted and moved, and this is still really hot because I just finished welding it, but it had shifted to where this tube was maybe like a quarter of the circle, like it was a quarter off. So to get it where it's centered more on that, like basically to make it line up, the center line of the flange would have been like over here, like 8 to 3/16 of an inch. So rather than bind it all up with the new mount, I decided to just cut this off and remake the piece where this connects to the chassis, which should eliminate any of the binding and the tension that we had in the system before. Stainless stuff, I mean, stainless headers, stainless crossover, and then all the car's done a few different wheelies. Maybe the frame is moved a little bit. I mean, 3/16 of an inch, 1/8 of an inch isn't a lot, but it's enough that trying to bind everything and get it, all the bolts started and get the V-bands on, it was a little bit of a struggle. But hopefully we are fixing that today. All right, let's go put it together the rest of the way. All right, here we are. Everything's all assembled. And as far as I can tell, it looks like it's sealed up really good. Hopefully we don't crank it up and it still leaks, because that would kind of suck after spending 4 hours doing that, plus an hour making the flange. Yeah, that'd be kind of a bummer of a day. But this is the first time the new motor is run. Will's not nervous at all.
Yeah.
And you can see we don't have the race fuel pump belt on it. Don't even have the fuel lines hooked up. But it should crank on the pump gas. Should. All right. Oh, she made fuel pressure. Wonder how much. I mean, it might not crank super great because of it having the air out there at the injector. You see any leaks? Yeah. Oh, Will's door is so bad. Squeaky door. Uh-oh, we got a water leak.
Can't really tell by one of the feed ports.
Okay. Hold for just a second. Is it leaking?
Do you have a little?
I've got just some of those little O-ring kits. Like,
Well, that's what I put. Well, I don't know if I replaced one that looked bad. You
All right, let's crank it. You ready? Holler if you see something bad. Don't know yet. 50. Yay! Alternator's charging. Good oil pressure. All right. That works. Woo! Good. You're making just a minute. All right, SoccerMom is live. She has 8 straight connecting rods and 8 perfectly good pistons in her again. So replaced all the rods. Like I said earlier, Texas Speed ended up sending us a complete new set of rods because they couldn't get us a single for the one that we bent. And then we got a couple of extra pistons so that in case we do this again,
No.
we'll have an extra piston already. But yeah, she's all back together. We'll get to Gold Star. Woo! We'll got our head pads bolted in too. Check them out. A little safer than what we had before. So
Shout out 11.
yeah, buddy Levin Horton, which I wonder what the name of his business is.
No, actually.
Might have to look that up. Levin does airplane interiors over, what's he around, like south of Daytona, New Smyrna? Okay. Maybe this makes it in the video, maybe not. We're going to be making, we've got another project that we'll show you in the next video about SoccerMom, where we're making some modifications for LS Fest. Yep. So anyways, we'll see you guys next time.